This is the story of a 74-year-old father who learned that humiliation at dinner was only the surface of a far deeper betrayal built around his money, home, and name.
At my daughter-in-law's birthday dinner at the Copper Heron, everyone was served lobster, wagyu, black cod, or steak. Everyone except me. Cressida slid the breadbasket across the white tablecloth and smiled. "You're 74, Ansel. Food this expensive is wasted on someone your age. With your teeth, bread is safer." Her parents laughed. I looked at my son, Leander, expecting him to stop her. Instead, he whispered, "Dad, don't make tonight awkward." So I picked up a roll, broke it in half, and said quietly, "You just crossed a line." They thought I was an old man being sensitive. What they didn't know was that I had quietly helped Leander with more than $166,000 over the years. They didn't know I had sold my marine refrigeration company for far more than they imagined. And they certainly didn't know that within days I would discover a $118,000 loan opened in my name, a secret credit card, an appraisal of my home, and a family trust designed to place my assets under their control. Then I found the detail that changed everything. That dinner, the lobster, the wine, even the meal they denied me, had been paid for with the credit card opened illegally in my name. They made me pay for the night they humiliated me. So I didn't yell. I let them keep talking. Weeks later, I returned to the same restaurant with 3 documents in my jacket. If your own family treated your generosity like ownership, what would you do? Stay with me and subscribe. Because the second dinner ended very differently. My name is Ansel Rourke. I am 74 years old and I live alone in a gray cedar house on Rowan Cove Road in Cape Elizabeth, Maine. My wife Elspeth died 4 years ago from pancreatic cancer, and since then the house has become part home, part archive of a life I have never been brave enough to fully put away. Her reading chair still sits by the window that faces the sea. Her chipped blue enamel mug is still on the kitchen shelf, and the red maple in the yard, the tree she planted when Leander was 4, still burns bright every October as if it has no idea the woman who planted it is gone. I once thought those remaining things would make loneliness heavier. In truth, they remind me that I once had a real home. I founded Harborline Cold Systems when I was 31. We installed and maintained refrigeration systems for fishing boats, seafood warehouses, and small processing plants up and down the Maine coast. It doesn't sound glamorous. But when a freezer holding hundreds of thousands of dollars in seafood dies at 2 in the morning, people quickly understand what a dependable service crew is worth. I sold the company in the summer of 2022 after 41 years of work, then kept the same old house, the same 13-year-old Ford Ranger, and the same habit of buying jackets from workwear stores. Not because I was poor. I simply never saw any reason to turn money into a billboard hanging from my body. Cressida's birthday fell on Saturday night, October 12. Leander reserved a table at the Copper Heron, an expensive restaurant inside a waterfront hotel outside Portland. The kind of place where the staff remembers regular customers by name, and the cheapest bottle of wine would have made me laugh back in the years when I had to calculate every gallon of gas for a service truck. I arrived 5 minutes early carrying a 2016 Bordeaux. Elspeth had once bought 2 bottles and saved them for, as she put it, a decent family occasion. I didn't repeat that phrase when I handed the bottle to Leander, probably for the best. There was very little decent about that evening except the candlelight. Cressida's parents, Roland and Verena Ashcroft, sat across from me. Roland had once owned a small chain of fitness clubs and now spent most of his time talking about golf. Verena had a habit of looking at waiters as though they were interviewing for a permanent position in her life. My grandson, Niall, was 10 and sat between Leander and me, dark hair falling into his eyes every time he bent over the menu. He was the only person at the table who didn't seem to be performing. He asked me about a tugboat that had run aground near South Portland, then excitedly told me his science class was building a model of a tidal ecosystem. I listened to him talk and thought maybe the night could still be saved. The food came out in waves. Roland got seared wagyu. Verena ordered a nearly 2-pound Maine lobster. Cressida chose scallops in saffron sauce, and Leander had miso-roasted black cod. Niall received a small sirloin, mashed potatoes, and asparagus. When the waiter placed the final plate on the table, the empty space in front of me was so obvious that I assumed it had to be a mistake. "I think my order hasn't come yet," I told the waiter. He opened his mouth to answer, but Cressida raised her hand and touched his wrist lightly, like someone stepping into a scene she had already planned. "It's fine. We already arranged it." She pulled the bread basket from the center of the table and placed it in front of me. "This is enough for you, Dad. You're 74. All that butter and heavy seafood isn't good for older people. And your teeth," she smiled and glanced at her mother. "You don't really have enough left to enjoy lobster. At that price, it would be a waste." Verena covered her mouth and laughed. Roland smirked. Leander wouldn't look at me. He cut into his fish as if the knife and fork required every ounce of his concentration. I turned toward my son. "You knew about this?" Leander exhaled, put down his fork, and lowered his voice. "Dad, don't make this awkward. Cressida is only thinking about what's best for you. Food like this could keep you uncomfortable all night." "What's best for me?" I repeated. "Yes, just eat light. Tonight is her birthday." I looked at Niall. He had stopped eating. He looked at the bread basket, then at his parents, and I saw the kind of confusion and embarrassment a child feels on behalf of adults who don't know enough to be ashamed of themselves. He pushed his plate slightly toward me. "Grandpa, you can have my steak." I put a hand on his shoulder. "No, buddy, you eat it." Cressida gave a small laugh. "See, he's fine." I picked up a roll. I didn't throw it onto the table. I didn't stand. I didn't shout at anyone, though I had every reason to. 41 years of diagnosing equipment failures had taught me that when a system begins making a strange sound, the first thing you do is not hit it. You listen until you know where the noise is coming from. I broke the roll in half, looked at Cressida, then looked at my son. "All right," I said, "but the two of you just crossed a line you'll wish you had never touched." Roland laughed. "You sound like you're about to sue the whole restaurant." I wasn't talking to the restaurant. Nobody laughed at that for long. Nobody understood it either. I ate bread, drank water, and watched. Cressida ordered a second bottle of Burgundy without looking at the price. Leander told Roland about a new contract for his company, Northline Event Logistics, and said revenue was up almost 20% that year. He told the story of building the business from one laptop, a rented warehouse, and no one backing me. I had heard that line before. Until then, I had thought it was only a man polishing his own legend. That night, it began to taste different. The bill came at $938. The total was over $1,000. Leander grabbed the leather folder before I could see the number clearly, slid in his card, and announced loudly enough for his in-laws to hear, "I've got tonight. It's my wife's birthday. Nobody pays for anything." I almost laughed, not because it was funny. In the parking lot, the October sea wind struck my face cold and clean. I sat inside the old Ranger and looked through the windshield at the warm rectangle of restaurant glass. The whole table was still there. Cressida tilted her head as she laughed. Verena was talking with both hands. Roland raised his glass. Leander sat in the middle like a man who possessed everything worth having. I had already left the picture, and no one inside seemed to notice the composition was missing a person. I drove back to Cape Elizabeth more slowly than usual. As I crossed Casco Bay, I remembered something Elspeth had asked in the last year of her life, when the Harbor Line sale was nearly complete. She had been sitting at the kitchen table, thinner from chemotherapy, but with the same sharp eyes. "Ansel, if one day they think you're nothing more than an old man in an old house, would you want to know how they'd treat you?" I laughed and told her she was thinking too far ahead. She didn't laugh back. "Money makes people very good at pretending to be kind. Sometimes you have to let them believe there's nothing left to take before you learn which part is real." I hated how right she had been. When I got home, I didn't go straight to bed. I went into my study, pulled open the bottom drawer of the oak desk, and removed a thick envelope marked Harbor Line, Final Sale, 2022. Inside were figures Leander didn't know. Investments spread across bond funds, brokerage accounts, and 2 certificates of deposit. I didn't open the envelope. I knew what was in it. The next morning at 5:47, while the coffee brewed, I did something else. I sat at the kitchen table and added up everything I had ever given Leander. Graduate tuition and event management certification, $52,000. Down payment on the house at Alder Reach in Falmouth, $41,500. The money that kept Northline alive after the 2021 stage collapse contract claim, $73,000. Total $166,500. I had never loaned him that money. I gave it. No interest. No promissory notes, no conditions. But Leander hadn't simply forgotten to say thank you. He had built a story in which the money had never existed. The phone rang at 8:12. Leander left a cheerful voicemail. "Dad, did you sleep okay? Cressida says thanks for coming. Last night was fun. Don't take the food thing personally. I played it twice. Then I shut the phone off." That was when I noticed the envelope from Pine State Trust Bank under a newspaper on the kitchen counter. It had arrived Wednesday, but I hadn't opened it. I had assumed it was an ordinary monthly statement. I picked it up. And only a few hours later, an old friend would call and ask me a question that made the breadbasket from the night before seem like the smallest thing I had to worry about. Bram Kessler called at 8:26 on Sunday morning. Bram had been my friend for more than 30 years. He used to work as a forensic auditor for a marine insurance company, tracking fraudulent claims involving warehouse fires, sunken boats, and equipment that somehow disappeared right when its owner needed money. We met during a harbor line dispute in 1994. His voice that morning did not sound like a man calling only to have coffee. "Ansel, are you home?" "Yes, I want to meet you at Harborlight Cafe, as soon as you can." Harborlight sits near the Portland fishing docks, with old wooden floors and coffee strong enough to stain a spoon. Bram was already in the back corner when I arrived at 9:05. He slid a cup toward me and asked, "How much money have you given Leander over the years?" I stared at him for a few seconds, because the question matched the number I had just calculated at my kitchen table. About $166,500. Bram did not look surprised. He pulled a pen from his jacket pocket. "Friday night I was at a fundraiser for the local business association. Leander was there. He stood in front of about 15 people talking about starting from nothing. I remember one sentence exactly because it made me turn and look at him. He said, 'I never took a dollar from my parents. Everything I built came without a safety net.' I looked down at the tabletop. Scratches in the wood ran like little maps. He likes telling that story." "No," Bram said. "He likes other people believing that story." He wrote 3 numbers on a napkin: 52,000, 41,500, 73,000. Then he drew a line and wrote the total. "I don't care how much a man gives his son. That's your business. What concerns me is when someone turns another person's help into proof of his own independence. People who do that don't just rewrite stories. If necessary, they rewrite records too." I looked up. "You didn't call me here because of one boast." Bram put the pen down. "I ran into Avara Dane at Pine State Trust on Thursday. She handles your private client relationship, right? Almost 8 years. She couldn't say anything specific because of confidentiality. But when I mentioned you, she asked whether you regularly open all your bank mail. I told her you still reconcile your checkbook by hand, so yes," she said. "Tell him to open every envelope this week." Then she stopped. "Ansel, I spent a career reading people's faces when they weren't allowed to say what they knew." She was worried. I thought about the white envelope under the newspaper. "The letter is at my house." Bram gripped my wrist for 1 second. It was such an unusual gesture from him that it told me more than his words had. "Go home and open it. And whatever is inside, call me before you call Leander." It took me 11 minutes to drive home. The Pine State Trust envelope was still on the counter, one corner trapped under the local paper. I washed my hands before opening it, an old habit whenever I needed a few extra seconds for my mind to catch up with what I was about to do. Inside was a quarterly account summary. Page 1 listed checking, savings, and certificates of deposit. Page 2 had a line I read 3 times. Credit line 8826, M outstanding balance, $118,000. Primary borrower, Ansel Rowan Rourke. I sat down. The account opening date was February 7, 2024. I remembered that month clearly because on February 2 I had undergone surgery on my right shoulder after slipping on ice. For 6 weeks, I slept in a recliner and took pain medication that turned time into soft, unreliable pieces. Leander and Cressida came almost every day. They brought food, collected mail, paid a few bills, drove me to follow-up appointments. I had been touched because I thought my son had finally learned what it meant to care for someone once that person was no longer useful. The mailing address on the credit line was not Rowan Cove Road. It was 19 Alder Reach, Falmouth. Leander's house. I read the stated purpose of the loan: home improvement and liquidity reserve. I had made no home improvements. I had no liquidity problem. Harborline was sold, my investments were stable, and the mortgage on my house had been paid off 8 years earlier. My hands stayed completely still. The stillness frightened me more than shaking would have. I called Bram. 118,000, I said the moment he answered. A line of credit in my name, opened last February. Mail going to Leander's house. Bram breathed out slowly. Do not call the bank directly. I want you speaking to an attorney first. I have an estate lawyer. Not enough. I know someone who handles financial fraud and elder financial exploitation. Neris Halden. She's worked cases like this for 2 banks in Maine. I'll call her. At 8:10 Monday morning, I sat in Neris's office on Exchange Street in Portland. She was around 55, silver at both temples, a woman who spoke briefly, listened for a long time, and looked at people so directly that rambling in front of her felt like wasting everyone's day. Bram sat beside me. I told her about the dinner, the money I had given Leander, the bank envelope, the surgery, the redirected mail. Neris took notes until I finished, then asked, while you were medicated after surgery, who brought documents for you to sign? The question pulled up an image I had not thought about in months. Cressida stood beside my recliner in a cream coat, holding a stack of papers on a plastic clipboard. Just homeowners insurance updates, Dad, she had said. Sign wherever you see a yellow arrow. I remembered joking that she organized paperwork the way she organized weddings. Before running her interior staging studio full-time, Cressida had worked in document coordination for a luxury staging and real estate firm. She understood forms, electronic signatures, identity verification, and how to make complicated paperwork feel routine. I signed some things, I said. I don't remember every page. Neris did not scold me. I need your surgery records. Every document you still have from that period, and I'll request Pine State Trust's account opening file, signature pages, and disbursement history. You think the signature was forged? I think we should not call it anything until we see it. But the fact that your mail was redirected to someone else's house without your knowledge is already enough for me to treat this as serious. I went home with Neris's business card in my jacket. That afternoon, Leander called twice. I did not answer. On Wednesday, he and Cressida appeared at my door without warning, carrying an expensive fruit basket and a glossy brochure. I looked at the fruit basket and remembered Elspeth saying once, "A gift that arrives before a request usually isn't a gift." Cressida moved through the living room like an appraiser, studying door frames and the staircase. Leander opened the brochure on the kitchen table. On the cover were the words Seacliff Residence, Kennebunk, Maine. Dad, Leander said, we've been thinking, this house is too much for one person. I'm still living in it. Nobody is saying you can't live here. It's just, living better may be a different question. Cressida slid the brochure closer. Seacliff has private rooms, physical therapy, transportation, a restaurant, staff around the clock. The Harbor Suite is only $6,350 a month. Only? She smiled as though I had made a joke. I asked, if I sell this house? After Seacliff is paid, who manages the rest of the money? Leander and Cressida looked at each other for less than a second. But I was watching. Cressida answered, we can help manage it, so you don't have to worry. Manage it how? Investments, expenses, account oversight. You've worked your whole life. It's time to let family handle the complicated part. I leaned back in my chair. Let me think about it. Leander's shoulders loosened. Cressida smiled. They heard that sentence as a delayed yes. After their car disappeared down the driveway, I picked up the Seacliff brochure and called Neris. They just suggested I sell my house and move into senior living. They want to manage whatever money is left. Neris was silent for a beat. Did they bring anything to sign? Not yet. They will. From now on, you sign nothing they bring you. You open every bank envelope immediately, and Ansel, do not let them know you've hired a lawyer. 3 days later, Naris called. I have the account opening file. Her voice was colder than usual. The signature is a problem, and there isn't just one account. I stood by the window watching the final leaves fall from the maple Elspeth had planted. How many? Enough that I need you here tomorrow morning. I looked at the Seacliff brochure still lying on the table, the words, "Where every day feels like home," printed in pale gold. For the first time, I understood that they did not merely want me out of the house. They wanted me out of control of my own life. On Friday morning, Naris was already seated at the conference table when Bram and I walked in. 2 folders sat in front of her, one navy blue and one brown. There was no coffee, no small talk. She pushed the blue folder toward me and said, "Page 4. I opened it. It was the application for the $118,000 line of credit at Pine State Trust, dated February 7, 2024. My personal information was accurate down to the last number: Social Security number, date of birth, home address, estimated property value, even the name Harbor Line, though I had sold the company almost 2 years earlier. At the bottom of the page was the signature Ansel R. Rourke in blue ink. At first glance it looked like mine. That was what made my skin go cold. Someone who did not know me would have seen nothing wrong, but I had signed my name tens of thousands of times on service contracts, completion certificates, payroll sheets, and checks. The R in my Rourke always dropped low and kicked slightly to the left, a habit I had picked up in high school. The R on this page was rounded, neat, and closed, like a letter copied from a handwriting model. "The bottom of the R," I said. Naris nodded. The handwriting examiner reviewed the original. Pen pressure is inconsistent with a natural signature. There are 3 hesitation points, and there are indications that a reference signature may have been traced using backlighting. Preliminary conclusion: the signature was copied, not written naturally. Bram clasped his hands together. I did not look at him. I kept staring at my name being worn by someone else like a stolen coat. Naris opened the second folder. During the credit review, we found another account. A MasterCard opened 16 months ago. You're listed as a joint account holder. Current balance, $28,760. I looked up. I don't have a MasterCard. I know. She turned the transaction summary toward me. There was a $5,940 purchase of a sofa and dining table from a Portland furniture showroom. Restaurant charges, spa charges, airline tickets, a 4-day trip to Scottsdale. A $2,300 purchase of event lighting equipment and a $1,870 vehicle rental. Every one of them had passed through an account carrying my name. Naris touched the tip of her pen to a line near the bottom. The Copper Heron, October 12, $1,126.84. I stared at the number. I did not need to ask what it represented. Dinner, Roland's Wagyu, Verina's Lobster, Cressida's Scallops, Leander's Cod, the Burgundy, and the bread basket they pushed toward me. All of it had been paid for with a card carrying my name. I stood and walked to the window. Below us, Portland was beginning an ordinary morning. A delivery truck at the curb, a woman pushing a stroller, an office worker crossing the street with a coffee cup. The humiliation from the restaurant came back, but now it had nothing to do with food. They had used my money to buy the stage on which they belittled me, then let Leander place the card on the table like a generous husband. "Does my son know about this card?" I asked. Naris did not rush the answer. The account was opened using a secondary email associated with Cressida's studio. But 3 online payments were made from an IP address registered to Northline's office. I cannot tell you who was sitting at the keyboard. I can tell you both environments appear in the account history. Bram muttered a curse under his breath. I kept looking out the window. What are my options? Civil, criminal, or both? Naris laid out each path clearly. A formal fraud claim with the bank to close the accounts and repair my credit file. A police report for identity theft and elder financial exploitation. A civil action for restitution. Or a negotiated repayment agreement if the responsible parties cooperated. "But there is one thing I want you to do before any formal notice reaches them," she said. "Update your will." I turned around. My existing will had been drafted after Elspeth died. Most of my estate would eventually go to Leander, with a separate education provision for Niall. At the time, I had seen no reason to complicate anything. One son, one grandson. It had seemed like the simplest logic in the world. What do you recommend? It isn't my decision. I recommend that you make your own decision while you still have full control, and before they know you've discovered the accounts. I asked for 3 days. That Sunday afternoon, I went to Falmouth Community Park to watch Neil play soccer. Leander said he had a client meeting, so only Cressida sat a few rows below me. Niall played left wing. He wasn't the fastest kid on the team, but he read the field beautifully. He often passed the ball before anyone else saw the opening. In the 26th minute, he cut inside, played a pass backward, and a teammate scored. I shot to my feet and clapped loudly enough that several parents turned around laughing. Niall looked toward the stands, saw me, and raised both hands over his head. At halftime, Cressida stood and moved to the far end of the bleachers to take a phone call. The sea wind came sideways across the field, and her voice carried back toward me. 742,000, she said. Yes, higher than projected. No, he hasn't signed. Leander will handle the emotional side. I did not move. Seacliff is holding the harbor suite through the end of the month. Once the assets move into the family trust, we have full management authority. Putting Niall on the beneficiary line makes the whole thing look more reasonable and easier to explain to the family. My hand closed around the metal edge of the bench. Cressida continued. The important thing is getting the signature before he talks to anyone else. I looked across the field. Niall was drinking water and laughing with his teammates. A 10-year-old boy had no idea his name was being used as a curtain in front of a plan to take control of his grandfather's property. Cressida ended the call and returned to her seat. I did not look at her. The second half began. Niall scored from just outside the box and ran toward the corner flag with his whole face lit up. I stood and cheered, and the strange thing was that my anger did not diminish my pride in him at all. Two emotions can live in the same body. I could despise what his parents were doing and still love that boy completely. After the match, Niall ran into me and wrapped his arms around my waist. Did you see my goal, Grandpa? Every second of it. Can you take me to Harbor Light for pancakes next week? Absolutely. Cressida stood a few feet away, smiling. You two really do have your own traditions. I looked at her. Yes, some family things don't need management paperwork. Her smile paused for a fraction of a second. On the drive home, I called Neris and repeated everything I had heard. $742,000. Seacliff, a family trust, Niall as beneficiary, full management authority, and the need to secure my signature before I spoke with anyone else. Neris was quiet for several seconds. Ansel, come in tomorrow morning. I think I found the draft she was talking about. But before I reached Neris's office the next day, I met a stranger outside my house. A silver Subaru was parked at the curb. A man in his 50s wearing a windbreaker stood beneath the maple Elspeth had planted, holding a laser measure and a clipboard while studying my roofline. Can I help you? I asked. He turned and handed me a business card. Dorian Pike, Atlantic Ridge Valuation. I was asked to conduct a preliminary appraisal of this property. Who asked? He checked the clipboard. Cressida Rourke. I gave him a very small smile. I'm the owner. Discomfort moved across Dorian's face. If you weren't aware, I can stop. No, keep going, but I walk with you. I took him through every room. The living room where Elspeth hung a pine wreath every Christmas. The study where I signed the Harbor Line sale agreement. The bedroom where Leander had slept as a boy. Dorian measured, photographed, and wrote notes. I did not stop him because now I wanted to know exactly what price they had put on my life. In the backyard, he stopped beneath the maple. A mature tree like this adds meaningful value to the lot. My wife planted it 40 years ago. He wrote something on the clipboard. I did not ask what. After Dorian left, Neris emailed me a 36-page PDF containing the complete MasterCard history. I read every line. On page 27, there it was again, the Copper Huron, 126.84. I called Bram. They paid for the dinner with my money. He said nothing for a moment. I'm not all right, I said, but I'm clear. There's a difference? A very large one. That evening, Neris called again. I have the draft trust. And Ansel, they're not just trying to take the house. I sat down in Elspeth's old reading chair. What are they trying to take? Almost everything you own. Outside the window, the final red leaf broke free from the maple, turned once in the air, and fell into the grass. The next morning, I would read a document that gave my son the power to decide how much of my own money I was permitted to spend each month. The file Naris placed in front of me Monday morning was titled Rourke Family Continuity, Trust, Preliminary Draft. It had been prepared by Halling and Vale, a Portland law office I had never hired, never called, and never set foot inside. On the first page, I was listed as the grantor, the person transferring assets into the trust. Leander and Cressida were listed as trustees, the people who would control and manage those assets. Niall, 10 years old, was named the sole beneficiary. On the surface, it could have looked beautiful. A grandfather protecting his grandson's future while the boy's parents managed the money until he came of age. But Naris did not let me stop at the surface. Page 5 listed the assets intended for transfer. The Rowan Cove Roadhouse, appraised at $742,000. My primary savings account at Pine State Trust, 2 certificates of deposit, and 1 catch-all clause written in language smooth enough for a tired man to slide right past it. All other assets owned solely or jointly by the grantor at the time of execution. I read that sentence twice. It did not mean part of the house, it meant everything. After I sign? I asked. Naris nodded. Management authority passes to the trustees immediately. Leander and Cressida. Yes. She turned to page 9 and held 1 paragraph in place with her fingertip. I read it, and something in my chest seemed to sink very slowly. Grantor shall receive a monthly personal living distribution in an amount determined by the trustees based upon reasonable need. So an allowance, I said. In practical terms, yes. How much? No fixed amount. They decide. They decide. I laughed once, dry and humorless. For 41 years I had decided payroll for technicians, approved equipment purchases worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, signed guarantees for fishing vessels, and negotiated contracts with companies 10 times the size of Harborline. Yet in a document I had never requested, my son and daughter-in-law were preparing to turn me into a man who needed their approval for grocery money. Does Niall know? He's 10. I asked, because I wanted to hear you say it. There is no indication the child knows anything about this. I looked at my grandson's name printed on the page, Neil Rowan Rourke, the boy who had asked whether I would come to his next soccer game. His name was being used to make a transfer of control look like a family legacy plan. Naris said, "There's something else." Halling and Vale sent this draft to my office after we notified them that you were represented in connection with the fraudulent accounts. They insist this is only an estate planning document awaiting your voluntary signature. That means no assets have actually been transferred. But they already inserted a proposed signing date, November 22, 19 days from now. Cressida said they needed me to sign before I spoke to anyone else. And now you've spoken to someone. I asked Naris what answer she needed from me. She said the first question was not whether I wanted to sue. It was how I wanted my property controlled if something happened to me tomorrow. My current will left roughly 70% of my estate to Leander. The rest included an education fund for Niall and several smaller charitable gifts. I had written it 2 years after Elspeth died, when I still believed my son's biggest flaw was his habit of exaggerating how self-made he was. I sat for a long time before I spoke. The house stays mine until I die. Nobody gets authority to sell it, mortgage it, transfer it, or manage it for me unless I'm incapacitated, and an independent professional confirms it through the proper process. Naris wrote, "After I die, the house is sold. Part of the proceeds go into trust for Niall, not managed by Leander, not managed by Cressida, your firm, or an independent trustee. Age of distribution, 28. Purpose restrictions, education, first home purchase. Medical needs, and at 28 whatever remains becomes his outright." Naris kept writing. And $180,000 to the Maine Trades Foundation. They fund apprenticeships in refrigeration, mechanics, and welding. I spent my life around people who worked with their hands. I want part of the money to go back there. What about Leander? I was quiet. That was the hardest question, not because of the money, but because it forced me to put a number on trust in a man I still loved. No control over any asset, not trustee, not executor. Any direct inheritance? Let me think about that one. Bram and I left the office close to noon. He said nothing until we reached the parking lot. You can love him and still lock the door. I looked at him. Don't let anyone force you to choose between love and boundaries, Bram said. That's a false choice. That afternoon, Leander called and invited me to dinner Saturday at his house. Just family, he said. Niall misses you. Cressida is making pot roast. I agreed, not because I was softening, but because I wanted to look at these people while they still believed. I did not know the whole picture. Leander's house on Alder Reach was so clean it barely looked lived in. Cressida opened the door wearing an ivory sweater and hugged me the way she always did. I stepped into the living room and immediately recognized the new charcoal sofa. The MasterCard transaction flashed in my mind. North Pier Interiors, $5,940. Nice couch, I said. Cressida ran a hand along the back of it. We've had it almost a year. I got a wonderful price. I smiled. I'm sure you did. Besides Leander, Cressida, and Niall, Leander's cousin Osgood Fenwick was there with his wife Maeve. Osgood had spent most of his career as a harbor foreman. He spoke plainly and had very little patience for performance. Halfway through dinner, he looked at me and asked, I hear you're thinking about selling the house and moving down to Kennebunk? I felt Leander stiffen at the head of the table. Who told you that? Osgood glanced at Leander. He said the place was getting to be too much for you. Said you were relieved to have another option. I lifted my water glass. When did I tell you I was relieved, Leander? He set his knife down. Dad, I was just explaining the situation. Everyone knows a big house takes work. That's different from saying I'm relieved. I'm trying to help you. I know, I said and smiled. The smile shut him up. After dinner, Niall dragged me into the living room to show me a Lego model of an ocean research vessel. He explained every deck and crane, then asked why marine refrigeration systems sometimes use two-stage compressors. I sat on the carpet and gave him a real answer. There are moments when, inside the same house, one person is trying to take control of your life while that person's child simply wants you to explain how a machine works. Life does not sort good people and bad people into separate rooms just to make our decisions easier. When I left, Leander walked me to the truck. Dad, he said, hands in his pockets. Are you okay? Why wouldn't I be? You've been different lately. Different how? Quieter. I opened the truck door. Sometimes talking less helps you hear more. That night I put two signatures side by side under my desk lamp. One was genuine, from the Harbor Line sale agreement. The other was from the line of credit application. My R opened on the first page and closed on the second. I thought looking at them would make me furious. Instead, I found myself grieving the boy Leander had once been. The kid who fell asleep in my service truck wearing a wool cap, his hands black with oil, because he had insisted on helping me replace a compressor belt. I did not know exactly where between that boy and the man he had become. He started believing that what belonged to me could become his if he repeated long enough that he deserved it. 3 days later, Neris sent me the new will for review. I read every line, changed 2 paragraphs, and scheduled the signing for Friday morning. That same afternoon, FedEx delivered an envelope from Halling and Vale. Inside were 12 pages titled Family Asset Continuity Agreement. The signing date had already been filled in, November 22, on the final page, beside the words, Signature of Grantor. A yellow arrow pointed directly at the place where my name was supposed to appear. I held the page and remembered Cressida standing beside my recliner after surgery, placing a pen in my hand and saying, Just sign where the arrows are, Dad. This time I was not medicated. This time I read everything, and on page 8, I found language worse than the word allowance. The trustees had the authority to liquidate, reposition, or dispose of property for the long-term benefit of the trust. Sell, reallocate, dispose. The $742,000 house, the savings accounts, and everything Elspeth and I had built over 40 years could be sold by 2 people, telling me they only wanted me to rest. I took a pencil and circled the paragraph. Then I wrote 2 words in the margin, not ever. I did not call Leander after reading the revised agreement. I called Neris. The next morning, the three of us sat around the conference table with 12 pages spread between us, like the plans for a building designed wrong from the foundation. Neris walked me through every clause. Authority to sell assets. Authority to move money between accounts. Authority to pay the trustees reasonable management expenses. Authority to reduce my monthly distribution if they believed my spending was inconsistent with the objectives of asset preservation. Cressida and Leander did not merely want the key to the safe. They wanted the power to decide when I was allowed to open it. If I accidentally signed, could it be reversed? I asked. You could sue to reverse it, Neris said. But a voluntary signature on paper would make everything far more difficult. They're trying to get you through the door before you realize the door only opens one way. I looked at the yellow arrow beside the signature line. They think I'm so old I don't read anymore. They think you trust them enough not to read. That hurt more. I signed the new will Friday morning at 9:32. 3 full signatures. Each R open at the bottom exactly as it had always been. Neris had the notary seal it and placed the original in her firm's safe. Under the new plan, the house and most of my estate would eventually pass into an independent trust for Niall. But his parents would have no management authority. $180,000 would go to trade apprenticeship programs. Leander would receive a fixed $35,000, not because he deserved it, and not as punishment. I wanted no one to say later that I had erased my son in anger. He was remembered, he simply was not given control. Now, I asked. Neris pulled the fraud file closer. Now we send everything. The formal complaint to Pine State Trust went out at 10:11. A request to freeze the line of credit and the MasterCard went with it. We attached the forged signature analysis, the redirected mail history, the handwriting expert's report, my surgery records, and the transaction history. A report concerning suspected elder financial exploitation was forwarded to the state's Financial Crimes Unit. I did not feel triumphant when Neris clicked send. I felt only that a door had finally shut where it belonged. Leander called that afternoon. I let the phone ring. His voicemail was shorter than usual. Dad, call me back. The bank contacted us. This is not something that should be handled through lawyers. I played the last sentence twice. Not something that should be handled through lawyers. A fraudulent $118,000 line of credit, a card approaching $29,000, and a trust designed to seize control of my assets were, in his mind, family matters. At 8:47 Saturday morning, Leander's car came up the driveway. He was alone. I had coffee ready and had known he would come. That man could hide many things, but from childhood onward. When he was frightened, he always wanted to talk in person, because his voice had always been his strongest tool. He sat in the chair to the left of the kitchen window, the same chair where he used to eat cereal before school. I poured him black coffee. Dad, you hired a lawyer. Yes. The bank froze the accounts. Yes. I want to explain. I sat across from him. Which account? He blinked. I'm asking seriously, I said. Which account do you want to explain? The $118,000 credit line or the MasterCard with a $28,760 balance? The color left his face. You know about the card? I know more than you think. Leander wrapped both hands around the cup. The credit line, North Line, was short on cash. You had just sold Harbor Line. I thought if I borrowed it temporarily and paid it back before you noticed. You thought I wouldn't notice? It's not the way you're making it sound. Then what is it? A bad decision made in panic. A forged signature does not appear by itself when someone panics. He looked down, I continued. Do you remember 2021, after the Bangor stage collapse? Your company was facing a claim the insurer refused to fully cover. Leander's jaw tightened. I transferred $73,000 to you within 4 hours. No questions, no contract, no repayment request. Dad, that was different. Yes. It was different because I gave you the money under my own name. He closed his eyes. I saw his chin tremble barely. Cressida said he began, then stopped. I'm not asking, Cressida. You don't understand the pressure we're under. I understand pressure. I once had 63 employees and 3 major customers late on invoices in the same month. I know what it feels like to stare at payroll and understand that if you get the numbers wrong, other families don't buy groceries. What I do not understand is how you looked at your father's name on a form and thought, usable. Leander looked up. His eyes were red. I didn't want to lose everything. I leaned forward. And to save everything that belonged to you, you were willing to take everything that belonged to me? He did not answer. I slid a photocopy of page 8 of the trust agreement across the table. The words liquidate, reposition, or dispose were circled in pencil. What is this? Leander looked at the page, then at me. Cressida said it was just an asset protection structure. Selling my house protects whom? You would be living at Seacliff. I didn't ask where I would sleep. I asked where the money would go. He shot to his feet, the chair scraping hard across the floor. You keep turning everything into a crime. I did not stand. Sit down. No, Dad, listen to me, Leander. My voice dropped lower. And he stopped. 40 years earlier, when he was small, that was the voice I used when he was about to run into the road. You used my name to borrow money. Your wife hired someone to appraise my house. The two of you prepared a document giving yourselves authority to sell my property. And the dinner where you made your father eat bread was paid for with a card opened under my name. If you dislike the word crime, choose another word. But do not ask me to call it love. Leander sat down slowly. His shoulders collapsed. The dinner, he whispered. I read the full statement. He covered his mouth with one hand. For a moment, he no longer looked like the confident owner of an event company or the man who told everyone he was self-made. He looked like a 13-year-old boy caught lying about a report card, except the consequences now had 6 digits. Are you going to the police? The records have been submitted. The bank will decide its part. Neris will explain the legal part to you. What about Cressida? She answers for her own part. Leander stood again, this time without anger. At the door, he turned around. Do you still love me? The question cut through me faster than any number had. Of course, he swallowed. Then why are you doing this? Because loving you does not give you the right to use my name to destroy my life. He looked at me for a long time, then went out to his car. 3 days later, another FedEx package arrived from Holling and Vale. The agreement had been revised down to 9 pages. The allowance had become a fixed $8,000 monthly distribution. The house clause now said I could remain in the property for life. But the management authority over the money and the right to sell assets when deemed necessary for the long-term interests of the trust remained intact. Cressida called that evening. Did you get the revised version? I did. We made major concessions. I read it. Then you understand this isn't about taking your money. I understand exactly what it is. She was quiet. I said, Cressida, I have one question. When you copied my signature onto the Pine State Trust application, did you use the insurance form or the furnace warranty document as your model? The line went dead silent. I don't know what you're talking about. The bank does. She hung up. I set the phone down and looked at Elspeth's photograph on the shelf. I had spent weeks avoiding a confrontation because I was afraid anger would turn me into someone else. By then I understood something different. A boundary is not anger, it is structure. I called Neris, then Bram. I want to finish this at the Copper Heron. Bram asked, why there? Because that's where they told their version of me in front of other people. Neris was quiet for a moment. What are you planning to do? No shouting, no threats. Just put the truth on the table. I reserved the long table by the fireplace for the following Saturday at 7:15. 6 seats. Me, Bram, Leander, Cressida, Osgood, and Maeve. The last time I had gone there carrying a bottle of wine and left with a bread basket lodged in my mind. This time I prepared 3 sheets of paper, a summary of the money I had given Leander, a statement showing the Copper Perron, 1,126.84 ants, and a confirmation from Pine State Trust stating that the signature on the disputed line of credit application was under investigation as fraudulent. I folded the pages in half and put them into the inside pocket of my jacket. Then I looked into the mirror and said to the 74-year-old man staring back at me, this time don't let anyone else order for you. The Copper Heron looked exactly the same that Saturday night as it had the first time. Soft amber light, quiet piano, and the stone fireplace burning steadily behind the long table. I arrived at 6:58. The manager brought water and a bread basket. I looked at the basket and pushed it slightly to the side. This time, it was not going to be anyone's main course. Bram arrived first. Neris had given us clear instructions. No threats, no pressure to sign anything, just the truth and copies of the documents. Osgood and Maeve came next, confused because my invitation had said only, family dinner. Something needs to be clarified. I gave them no explanation. Leander and Cressida walked in at 7:13. Leander wore a dark blue shirt without a tie. Cressida wore a black dress, her hair pulled neatly back, her expression so composed, I knew she had practiced it in a mirror. When she saw Bram and Osgood, she slowed half a step. I thought this was just family, Leander said. Osgood is family. Bram has known this family for more than 30 years. Cressida looked at the chair beside me, then chose the seat across the table. Where's Niall? With a friend. Tonight is not a child's business. That made her look at me more sharply. The waiter brought menus. I ordered for no one except myself. Osgood chose lobster, Maeve ordered salmon, Bram chose halibut. Leander ordered steak, Cressida had scallops. When the waiter reached me, I said ribeye medium, baked potato, and leave the bread basket in the center of the table. Leander looked down. Dinner began with an almost absurd normality. Cressida barely ate. Leander drank more water than wine. I cut into the first piece of steak and thought Elspeth would have enjoyed the fact that I had finally ordered exactly what I wanted. When the main plates were cleared, I put one hand flat on the table. I asked everyone here because a few weeks ago at this exact table, a story was told about me. That I was old, that I no longer needed good things, that my family was simply taking care of me. Cressida opened her mouth. I raised one finger. I'm going to finish. I took the first sheet from my jacket pocket and unfolded it. Osgood, you've heard Leander say he built everything himself without help from family, correct? Osgood looked at Leander, then nodded. More than once. I read, June 18, 2010, $52. Zuzan for Leander's tuition and professional certification. Leander looked down at the table. April 4, 2014, $41,500 for the down payment on Alder Reach. Cressida tightened her hand around her water glass. September 9, 2021, $73,000 transferred to Northline Event Logistics to cover the shortfall after the Bangor incident. I placed the page on the table. Total $166,500. I'm not reading this to humiliate you, Leander. I'm reading it because for years you've told a story in which the person who helped you did not exist. Receiving help does not make a man weak. Erasing the person who helped you makes him dishonest. Leander drew a breath. Dad, I'm not finished. I took out the second sheet, the Copper Heron, October 12, $1,126.84. Maeve frowned. That was Cressida's birthday dinner. The dinner where everyone had steak, lobster, scallops, and I got the bread basket because good food is wasted on a 74-year-old. Osgood turned toward Cressida. Maeve's whole expression changed. Ansel, I didn't know that happened, Osgood said. I know. I placed one finger on the transaction line. The interesting part is that Leander put a card on the table and announced that he was paying. But the MasterCard used that night was opened in my name without my knowledge. So financially speaking, I paid for the dinner that was used to humiliate me. No one spoke. Cressida suddenly stood. This is a performance. You brought outsiders here to smear us. Bram did not move. I said, sit if you want. Leave if you want. No one is keeping you here. Cressida remained standing. You're turning a few financial decisions into. I took out the third sheet. Pine State Trust has confirmed that the $118 zero line of credit opened in my name is under investigation because the signature is not authentic. The handwriting examiner believes it was traced. The mail was redirected to your house. And the MasterCard history includes an email linked to your studio. The color drained from Cressida's face. Leander turned toward his wife. You told me the signature was from paperwork Dad already signed. She looked at him. Not now. You said he had agreed. Leander, you said it was temporary. Cressida slammed one palm onto the tablecloth. The water glass rattled and droplets splashed onto the linen. Don't stand there and pretend you didn't know. You used the credit line money to pay vendors. You knew where it came from. Leander stared at her. I knew you opened the line. I didn't know you forged his signature. You didn't ask. Because you told me Dad signed it. I did not interrupt. Some truths only appear after people no longer have time to coordinate their version. Osgood leaned forward. You two borrowed money using Ansel's name? Cressida turned on him. You don't understand the situation. Then explain it. Northline was about to collapse. We have employees, contracts, a mortgage, a child. Ansel had money sitting there doing nothing. That final sentence landed harder than any shout. I looked at her. Money sitting there doing nothing. Cressida knew she had said too much, but it was already done. That's not what I meant. That is exactly what you meant. Leander closed his eyes. I placed a 2-page copy of the draft trust in the middle of the table. And this is the part I wanted Osgood and Maeve to hear. Cressida and Leander prepared a trust in which they would control my $742,000 house, my savings accounts, and my other assets. I would receive living expenses under their management. They would have authority to sell property. Niall was named the beneficiary. Maeve lifted a hand to her chest. Does Niall know? No. Cressida lowered herself into her chair very slowly. You don't understand how trusts work. Nerys Halden does. The lawyer's name made Leander look up. I have a new will. I have legal representation. The disputed accounts are frozen. The trust the two of you prepared will never carry my signature. Leander rubbed both hands over his face. What do you want? At last the right question. I want my name removed from debt that is not mine. I want the money repaid under whatever agreement the bank and council determine. I want every document using Niall's name without his knowledge withdrawn. And I want the two of you to stop telling people I am incapable of managing my own assets simply because I won't hand them to you. And if we don't, Cressida asked, then the matter follows the full legal process. That is not a threat. That is the remaining option. Leander looked at me. Tears began to gather in his eyes but did not fall. Did you cut me out of the will? I changed my will, so yes. I did not say the details. I'm your son. Yes. You would let me lose my company? I leaned back in my chair. You were once on the verge of losing that company, and I saved it. Then you told the world no one had ever helped you. This time you will be responsible for the part you built. Leander dropped his head. His shoulders shook once. Cressida pushed back her chair. I'm leaving. Leander did not stand with her. She looked at him. Are you coming? He kept staring at the table. Leander, his voice was barely audible. I need to stay. Cressida looked around the table at each of us, then walked out of the restaurant. A few minutes later, Osgood and Maeve stood as well. Osgood put a hand on my shoulder. I wish I'd known sooner. You know now. Bram went outside so Leander and I could speak alone. My son sat across from me, eyes red. I'm sorry, he said. I did not say. It's okay. Some apologies are ruined when the listener rushes to erase the consequences. What are you sorry for? He breathed hard. For letting this happen. For using the money. For not asking questions. For the dinner. For... He swallowed. For knowing you helped me and still telling people I did everything myself. And the signature? If I'd known she forged it, I would have. Don't tell me what you would do in a version of the past that no longer exists. Tell me what you will do next week. He looked at me. You'll meet with Nerys. Tuesday at 10? Tuesday at 10. I'll be there. I left cash beneath the small plate for my own meal, even though Bram had already said he would cover it. As we stood, Leander looked at the breadbasket. Dad, yes, if I can fix any of this, one thing at a time. Outside, cold drizzle blew sideways across the parking lot. I had taken only a few steps when I heard Leander call behind me. Dad! He ran toward me, breathing hard, his hands hanging awkwardly at his sides as though he did not know what to do with them. I thought because you had so much, taking a little wouldn't change anything. I looked at my son. That is the worst thing you've said tonight, I told him. Not because of the money. Because it means you stopped seeing me as a person. He broke down crying. I put one hand on his shoulder for a second. Tuesday. Be on time. Then I walked to the Ranger. Inside my jacket pocket, the 3 sheets of paper felt lighter. Not because they mattered less, but because for the first time, the truth was no longer something I had to carry alone. 6 weeks after the dinner at the Copper Heron, winter laid a thin white layer over Rowan Cove Road. The maple Elspeth had planted stood bare beyond the kitchen window. I used to think the tree was most beautiful when it burned red in October. But that year I noticed a different kind of beauty after every leaf had fallen away and only the true structure remained. Families are like that too. Leander arrived at Neris's office at exactly 10 o'clock Tuesday morning, just as he had promised. Cressida did not come. 2 hours later, Neris called me. He had signed a cooperation agreement, provided Northline's records, and accepted responsibility for repaying the portion of funds that could be traced into the company. The $118,000 line of credit was formally moved into fraud dispute status. The MasterCard was frozen, and the transactions that were not mine were being separated from my credit record. Cressida hired her own attorney. Neris told me only what I needed to know. The forged signature investigation continued. Cressida's studio was ordered to preserve and produce records. Halling and Vale withdrew the entire trust proposal. Niall's name disappeared from every document involving the transfer of my property. That was the part I cared about most. Northline did not collapse overnight, but Leander had to sell 2 trucks, give up 1 rented warehouse, and abandon plans to open a Portsmouth branch. A major client canceled after learning the company was under financial review. When Osgood told me, he watched my face as though waiting for satisfaction. I had none. I thought only about what I had said in the parking lot. One thing at a time. Accountability does not always look like a prison door closing. Sometimes it looks like a man selling things he bought with money he never should have had, then going back to work on a scale he can actually carry. Leander called 11 days later. I watched his name on the screen until the 4th ring before answering. Dad, yes. I'm not calling to ask for money. All right. He was quiet for a moment. Cressida and I are living separately. I did not ask who had moved out. Is Niall okay? We haven't told him the details. We just said the adults have things to work through. He asked if he had done something wrong. My chest tightened. Do not let him believe that for even 1 minute. I know. No, Leander. You have to say it out loud to him. Children fill silence with their own guilt when adults refuse to explain. He breathed out. I will. Another pause. Can you still take him to breakfast on Sundays? That was never something you could take away from him. Leander's voice caught. Thank you, Dad. For the first time in a very long time, his thank you had nothing attached to it. No, by the way. No, could you? No, I'm in a bind. Just thank you. Harborlight Cafe became a Sunday ritual for Neil and me. He ordered pancakes with whipped cream and chocolate chips. I ordered eggs and black coffee. He told me about school, soccer, research vessels, and a crab in his classroom that escaped from its tank. Those small stories repaired something legal documents could not touch. The feeling that family had become nothing more than a place where people negotiated advantage. One morning he asked, "Are you mad at Dad?" I set down my coffee. Children deserve truthful answers, but they do not need the full weight of adult wrongdoing dropped into their laps. I'm angry about things your father did. Is that different? Very different. He looked at me. You can love someone and still say what they did was wrong. If you're only allowed to love someone when you agree with everything they do, that isn't love. That's fear of losing them. Niall thought about it for a while, then cut another piece of pancake. Dad is sad, I know. Do you still love him? I smiled faintly. Yes. He nodded as if a puzzle piece had finally clicked into place. I did not sell the Rowan Cove house. I painted the shutters the slate blue Elspeth had always wanted, repaired the front step, and replaced the porch light. Not to prove I could live alone, but because the house had become something I wanted to care for again instead of an asset other people were waiting to divide. Bram stopped by one afternoon with 2 coffees. We sat at the kitchen table and watched snow begin to fall. Do you regret not confronting them the night of the restaurant? He asked. I wanted to. Why didn't you? Because I know Leander is good at talking. Cressida is even better. If I had shouted before I had documents, they could have turned the whole thing into a story about an old man whose feelings were hurt over dinner. They could have called me sensitive, confused, forgetful. Bram took a sip of coffee. I needed something they couldn't talk over, numbers and signatures. He smiled. You're still the refrigeration guy with a checklist, 41 years, hard habit to break. But the truth was, I had learned something my profession had never taught me. I used to think strong boundaries had to make noise. Doors slamming, raised voices, people storming out. They don't. The strongest boundary of my life was a signature I refused to put on a page. A phone call I did not answer immediately. Letting an attorney speak where anger would only have made things messier. A simple no that did not need a third explanation. A few days before Christmas, Leander came to the house. No flowers, no fruit basket, no brochure, no paperwork. He carried a small wooden box. "I found this in storage," he said. Inside was the old pipe wrench I had given him when he was 12, back when he first started following me around Harborline during summer break. The handle still had AR, engraved into it with a grinder, and beside it the clumsy LR he had added himself. "I thought you should have it back." I shook my head. "I gave it to you, but keep it. If you want to fix something, start with what belongs to you." Leander looked at me, eyes red, but this time he did not cry. "I'm trying, I know." We did not hug. Not yet. He drank 1 cup of coffee, asked about my shoulder, and told me Northline was negotiating a repayment plan. When he left, he stood in the doorway longer than usual. "Dad, I don't expect you to trust me anytime soon." "Don't." He nodded. "Just live in a way that makes trusting you stop feeling like a gamble one day." Then he left. That night, I sat alone in the living room and watched the lamplight reflect off Elspeth's picture frame. I imagined her asking whether all of it had been worth it. My answer was yes, but not because I had won. I did not win against my son. No one wins when they discover the child they raised has used their name as a financial tool. I had simply stopped losing things I never should have placed on the table in the first place. Dignity, autonomy, and peace inside my own home. If my story leaves you with anything, I hope it is not a hunger for revenge. Remember this instead. Kindness is not power of attorney. Family is not a blank signature. The fact that you once helped someone does not give them the right to decide how much money, space, or dignity you still need. And age does not turn your name on a document into communal family property. If someone keeps saying, "It's just paperwork," read it. If someone tells you, "Don't make this awkward every time you ask a question," ask another one. If a person is kind only when they think you are about to give them something, pay attention to how they treat you when they believe there is nothing left to take. Do not confuse keeping the peace with erasing yourself from your own life. I still love Leander, and I still take Niall out for pancakes. Human beings are not one color. That is why stories like this hurt. But understanding someone's complexity does not mean handing the keys to the worst part of them. I am 74 years old. I do not have every answer. I only know that on that night at the Copper Heron, they thought a breadbasket proved I was old, weak, and no longer worth asking what I wanted. They were wrong. The most important thing on that table was never the lobster, the steak, or the bread. It was my name, and yours matters just as much. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If you've ever had to learn how to set boundaries with someone you love, share your thoughts in the comments. Someone else reading may need exactly what you have to say. If stories about family, self-respect, and truth turning the tables are worth hearing, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. I genuinely appreciate the time you spent here. As for me, next Sunday morning I'll still be at Harborlight at 8:20. Neil will order pancakes. I'll order eggs and coffee. And nobody at that table will need anyone else's permission to choose his own meal.